The following is intended for mature audiences. This is a special edition of Vaping in the Mic. This is Mike Peterson coming with a very special edition of Vaping in the Mic. Today, we're going to be talking about some things that are extremely serious, extremely important that are happening here in Ohio. It's the entire reason why all of these people have come together. Joining me right now, and I will take a look to make sure that I am telling you. In the upper left-hand corner, the president of Ohio Vapors Trade Association, Mr. James Jarvis. Down on the bottom left-hand corner, blogger and award-winning consumer advocate who lives here in Ohio, Mr. Kevin Crowley. And in the bottom right-hand corner, our lobbyist, and I know she has tons of other titles, but joining us today very specifically for this is Charlotte Hickcox. Charlotte, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I am so glad that you took the time to really come together with these other gentlemen. The four of us want to talk to all the people that are going to be paying attention, watching, looking, listening, otherwise. We have a massive, massive problem in the state of Ohio. There have been calls to action for people to take part and say, please vote against the T21 and not including in vapor. And the turnout has been horrible. It makes me ashamed that we have this many people in the association, and this turnout is horrendously horrible. Folks, if you can't handle truth, tune out now, because this next hour is going to be nothing but. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat stuff. We don't have time for that. I know that everybody is sitting and saying, well, T21, because it's being presented in Congress, is going to be a national thing. Fine. Let's all get past that part. Let's talk about the real meat and potatoes of what is going on. And that is being labeled as a tobacco product. First, James, tell me, in your estimation, what is that going to do in the state of Ohio?
Well, and including us into the definition of tobacco is going to be a huge issue for us. For one, it's going to put out some really negative points that, we're just as dangerous as tobacco. So if there's a vapor using cigarettes or using vapor products, they're more than likely going to go back to smoking cigarettes because they think it's just as dangerous. And then secondly, you have the folks that are contemplating switching from tobacco to vapor. They may not want to make that switch now because they're comfortable smoking cigarettes. And well, for the same as tobacco, you've got that aspect. Plus, then you look at the regulatory side, it's going to make it easier for them to tax us. It's going to make it easier for them to institute flavor bans, indoor smoking or indoor vaping bans, and so on and so forth. So it's just a bad piece of legislation all the way around, and we really need to have our own category.
Charlotte, from a standpoint of where you are and working with a lot of these people, can you tell me a little bit more than what James has already kind of iterated? How is this? How long do we have? And what impact, from your viewpoint, is this going to have?
Sure. So the language for Tobacco 21 and the expanded definition of tobacco product is contained in the governor's budget. It's a 2-year budget to essentially run the state of Ohio. Everything from prisons and schools, roads and bridges, everything that costs money in the state is essentially in this bill. So it's very large. It also takes a lot of time to pass. It was introduced back in March, and that's when we knew that Tobacco 21 was in it. We were happy to see the governor didn't propose any taxes on vapor like Governor Kasich had for the past 3 or 4 years. And so that bill has made its way through the Ohio House of Representatives. That's where it starts. It was passed out of the Ohio House with a large majority. Tobacco 21 stayed in it. We were very surprised that happened. Quite frankly, we talked to almost every member of the Finance Committee, the committee that handles the bill, and almost every member told us, oh, well, it's a personal freedom. You should be able to do whatever you want at 18. We don't like it. So we were very shocked that it stayed in. And the House is where that expanded definition of tobacco product came from. It was inserted by the Speaker's office at the request of the Ohio Department of Health. And so the bill has been over in the Senate. James and I and some other members of the board have been meeting for weeks now with our Senate finance members, as well as some others. The Senate's a smaller place, so it's a little bit easier to hit everybody. We've had some really great conversations. Last week, James and 2 of our OHVTA members testified. Quite frankly, we were supposed to have 2 more, but they decided not to show up that day, which was a little disconcerting. And so we are now awaiting the Senate's version of the bill. We don't think that's going to happen this week. There's a slight possibility maybe Thursday or Friday. I would assume at this point it will probably be early next week. We are in crunch time. By law, by the Constitution, the budget bill has to be signed into law by 11:59 on June 30th. The new fiscal year starts in July 1. And so what needs to happen between now and then, so 27 days, is the Senate needs to pass it. It will then go to what we call a conference committee, which is a very few members of the House and the Senate working together to iron out their differences and to come to an agreement. After that, both chambers vote on it again, and then it will go to the governor for his signature, where he can line item veto things. So he can veto things, which is essentially get rid of it, take it out of the bill, down to a comma. Since this is the governor's initiative, we don't think that he would ever veto Tobacco 21 or the expanded edition of tobacco products. But that is where we are in the timeline that we are dealing with.
Wow. Kevin, from a pure consumer standpoint, as you have an understanding of what's going on, how bad is this going to affect the consumer?
I think with something you and I were privately talking and you memed me, any threat is a threat no matter what we're looking at from a consumer point of view. Once they take the stand of it being tobacco by definition only, it just what Charlotte just said, it opens up everything else. It opens up T21 because it's tobacco. It opens up health implications for smokers who believe it's tobacco. It opens up the tax problems. So I don't want to go crazy into the explanation, but the consumer that is already doing so like we are, it doesn't affect us except for taxes or the T21 if they're under 21. If it's a smoker who's thinking about it, there's so much manipulation in what the definition becomes that what both James and Charlotte said is detrimental to the consumer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's going to become an issue. Yes. There is no doubt about it. Charlotte, I'm going to ask you, I had sent you some questions. I'm going to breeze through these questions with you here for a minute. The first one was, and we kind of covered it, why is it important not to be included as or labeled as tobacco?
Right. So I think there are a couple of things to remember. One, just because this expanded definition of tobacco product that includes liquid nicotine is under the Tobacco 21 code section does not mean it only stays in that code section. That means in the rest of the Ohio Revised Code, which is our set of laws and regulations for the state, that everything that has liquid nicotine is a tobacco product. That means we are regulated like tobacco. That means when you are writing a new tax or revising the tax system for anything that contains tobacco in it, which would be liquid nicotine, that means vapor products can very easily be assessed a tax that they're not assessed today. It makes it much easier for the state to come out and say, okay, vapor products, you are classified as a tobacco product now, so you are now subject to the wholesale tax that other tobacco products in the state have to pay.
Can I ask,
yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, do you know what the other wholesale tax is currently in Ohio?
I just thought that you were going to ask me that, and I don't. I think
it's okay. I bring that up, and I stopped you there because I want
17%.
I think it is. It's 16 or 17, I think.
And this will also include zero nicotine,
right,
according to the definition.
And that's the other huge part. The people that are watching, catching in the chat room, whatever, you've got to understand, for the vapor industry, this is going to reclassify taxation all over the board.
Right. And I will say this, that, it is not, July 1st, vapor will not, if tobacco product definition, the expanded definition stays in as is, it doesn't mean that July 1st, we're going to be taxed like tobacco. But it means that once the legislature comes back for a recess, someone could very easily introduce a piece of legislation, and we are already labeled as that, and it makes it that much easier to assess that tax on us. There would still have to be a new law written to do that, but it makes it so much more easy.
And that was my second question, was it means that a future taxation would probably be just like here we go. Not
right,
a full-blown what we have to go through now, fighting taxation.
Right. And I just got a text from a friend of mine who works in the tobacco industry who's apparently watching, and the other tobacco product wholesale tax is 17%.
And just by looking at states around us or other states, was it Vermont that just passed an ungodly wholesale tax?
Yeah, I think it was 92.
Yep.
With other states passing huge amounts of taxation, do you think that it is likely that Ohio will go, oh, hey, we need to raise the taxes on these horrible products, is what they're going to say? You think that's possible?
So I think it's kind of a multifaceted question and answer. I think that James and I and the board and OHVTA have done a great job in the 5 years since the association started and since I started working with the association of educating members and of the legislature and talking to lawmakers about who we are and what we do and why taxing us the way that we tax tobacco is not a one-for-one. And so I think that message has been heard, and certainly because there were so many attempts in the last 5 years to do that, that fight has been waged a lot. I think that, too, Ohio just instituted in the transportation budget a very large gas tax increase. So all of us are paying more money at the gas pump to drive our cars. This legislature is not a huge fan of raising taxes. In fact, they've cut a lot of taxes in the past few budgets and are trying to do so in this budget as well. And so there's not a great desire from a Republican legislature to raise taxes. But that's not to say that isn't always on the front of our minds every time we're meeting with the legislator. Every time James and I have sat down with one to talk about Tobacco 21, we have said, oh, but wait, don't even start to think about tax.
Right.
And so, it is, I think it's unlikely right now. Legislators don't like doing taxes in standalone bills, what we call a standalone bill. Mm-hmm. It would probably be in a budget bill or a budget corrections bill, which will happen next year. So I don't think so. That's not to say it's not going to come at some point.
Is any of this that's going on now, do you believe, either you or James, do you believe that it would make it easier for a flavor ban in the future since we are classified as tobacco? As in, would they look and say, well, tobacco only comes in tobacco and menthol, and that's all we want? Do you think that they might head in that direction? Is it a possibility?
Sure. I will say this. I also represent at the State House the Vapor Technology Association, our national association. And so talking with a lot of my counterparts who are in other states, it is remarkable that Ohio only has tobacco 21 and only has this expanded definition of tobacco product. Most states in this country are facing taxes and a flavor ban and tobacco 21. And so Ohio is very lucky in that regard. That's not to say that our fight isn't important here. But yes, I think that we should be ready for a flavor ban any day now.
Wow. James?
Absolutely. I think, like you said, Mike, and you touched on it in your question, it absolutely will open up the floor for them to say, well, since tobacco is just mint, menthol, and tobacco, why are we encouraging our youth to continue vaping because of this flavor issue that's out there? You know, it'd be just that much easier for them to flip the switch without even including us in the conversation at that point, which is why we really need to get this piece removed and get our consumers and our businesses active, sending the emails, contacting their senators to explain to them, hey, flavors are a very beneficial piece. We are not tobacco. We are tobacco harm reduction. We are at least 95% less harmful, and we are twice as effective as what's on the market now. And that's the message that we have to send.
And also say, I mean, we have a health department a state health department who had a press conference with the governor and at Nationwide Children's Hospital here in Columbus, who, you know, had a table full of bottles that did not have great labeling on them from our perspective, that probably wouldn't have, you know, held up to VTA's marketing standards. They also had bowls of gummy worms on the table that had nothing to do with us, obviously, but are trying to make that connection to other unseemly products. They held up a poster of flavors that were obviously from 5 or 6 years ago, before this industry started to turn around and have, you know, responsible marketing and advertising and labels. And so they are very much using scare tactics to go after us. That is just clear across the board between the health department and the health advocacy groups.
And that really gets me, because if they're willing to go to a point of saying, here's all these scary things and we're going to make up half of them, or we're going to go to the furthest extreme that we can find even the smallest thing and turn it into something huge, once we get labeled as tobacco, they're going to double, triple, quadruple what they are doing in scare tactics to railroad us and get us out of the market.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Kevin, and I need you to think about this for just a moment. You may already have an answer. If it is to a point where a flavor ban is introduced, and it did go through, from a consumer's advocate point, how is that going to affect all the people that are out there?
I have a big enough network of consumers who do it yourself. I don't. I could probably make 2 emails and a phone call and have something delivered within a day, or 2 or 3.
Let's put this on point right here. Not to argue with you.
No,
I love DIY.
Right.
It's how I started. But DIY is not going to deliver to all of the people that are using vapor products today.
Right.
The black market can't expand like that. And if it does, they're going to come down with both feet and Thor's hammer and hammer all of it out.
Yeah, SWAT teams. They'll do SWATs.
But
the other half of that is, I always kind of refer to my grandmother, who was in her 70s when she died. She's not going to fuss with stupidity. Either she'll go back to smoking, or she is a smoker. She'll continue to smoke rather than seek out a black market. You know, and that's the other detrimental side of this, in my opinion. You know.
James, if this actually went way south, how would it affect shops?
I mean, if you're talking about flavor bans,
Yep.
If we lose flavors, I mean, it's going to shut down, in my opinion, the industry, because we've all tasted tobacco e-liquids. They taste, first off, nothing like tobacco, but there are worse sellers, and the menthol really isn't that attractive either. People will just go back to smoking cigarettes because it's what they enjoy. You know, it's what they're familiar with and it's what they enjoy because they want that taste. They're not going to necessarily get that from a tobacco or a menthol liquid, whereas they enjoy a strawberry or a peach or a, you know, coconut cream or whatever it is. They enjoy that, and it's encouraging them to continue to do it because they are benefiting both in health and in soothing their need for that. But if they're going to just rely on tobacco, menthol, or unflavored liquid, the industry can't survive and it won't thrive. It'll shut down the vape shops, which will in turn shut down the entire industry.
And I want people to remember, I'm not sitting here trying to fearmonger. One, I'm really upset with the apathy that I'm seeing in Ohio. It really ticks me off. I can understand it, but folks, we are at a juncture to, if they pass and label us as tobacco, we are only steps away, inches away from higher taxation, from flavor bans, from being railroaded out to shutting stores down. And here again, I know DIY, they're going to say, well, you know, I can take care of a couple of my friends. Well, that's awesome, you know, but then you get right back to the point of not knowing where some of this stuff is coming from. Is it a safe product like we have on the market now? And, okay, you can supply a couple of your friends. What about the other 68, 70, 250,000 people in Ohio that vape? What are they
Mike,
going to
do? Look at it this way. It will revert back to the way it was in 2008. And let me tell you, the vape industry in 2008 was absolutely nothing. You would beg a store, tobacco shop, gas station, whatever, to put in a cigarette-like starter kit that tasted like tobacco and would sit on the shelf for 2-3 weeks at a time before it would even move.
Wow.
Nobody would touch it. So that's what we get to look forward to. And unfortunately, it'll push all those people that have been so successful in working themselves down to a 0 milligram. It'll push them right back to smoking cigarettes. We know where that ends up.
Yeah, and the Dr. Farsellino study shows that's exactly what's going to happen. Charlotte, if people can find the kahunas to motivate themselves, which is better for them? Is it better to send an email, or is it better to make a phone call to their representative?
I would say do both. There's no reason why you can't do both. You know, both of them take very little time. You know, you should absolutely really only be contacting, I mean, you can't, if you contact a state senator or a state representative who's not your legislator, you're not going to be heard. And that's just part of the deal. And that's why we have representatives and senators from our districts. However, that's not to say that you shouldn't be contacting the Senate President, Larry Obhoff, and you should be contacting Matt Dolan, who is the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. And then you should be contacting your senator as well. And if you go to ohiolegislator.gov, you should be able to look up your individual representatives and senators and be able to email right from there. And then I would call, and you're going to get an aide when you call. That's fine. They run the office. I was an aide in the State House at one point in time. That's how I started my career here. They do the bulk of the work, but they're going to jot down everyone who calls on which topic they call on. And so absolutely you should be doing both.
If they decide to make a phone call, is there a preferred measure of what to say? Because I know a lot of people that are out there would turn around, and the minute that somebody on the other side says hello, they're going to freeze, they're going to get scared. Sure. So can we prime them? Is there a set thing? What should they say?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, always be polite. These are just people too. Legislators are just people too. You know, you get a lot further with honey than you do with anything else. So always be polite, especially if it's a staff member. And then secondly, you know, just say, look, I'm calling to talk about Tobacco 21 in the budget bill. I hear that you're trying to put vapor under the definition of tobacco. That's not a great thing to do. Vapor is not tobacco. There's no tobacco in it. It doesn't make sense. It should be in its own classification as a product and as an industry. And please remove that language from the budget bill.
And that's one of the biggest things is for people to remember why you're calling.
Right.
The staffers that are going to answer the phone, they put their pants on the same way that you or I do. Mm-hmm. They're typically polite people, but their time listening to you is minuscule. Right. Because that phone is continuing to ring even when they are talking to you. So try to be polite. Keep it short. And just as Charlotte said, mention why you're calling.
Right.
And mention that you are a constituent of that person.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'd also say there are 2 call to actions out right now. One from the Vapor Technology Association and one from CASA. If you go to CASA's webpage, it will formulate the letter for you. There's a template for it, and then it will automatically find your legislator based on your district. I would also say if you're a store owner, you should really be doing both your store address and your home address. Certainly if you are a store owner, you need to be starting to interact with your legislators on a regular basis. Follow them on Facebook. Try to go to their district coffees and meetings. Try to start a relationship with them. If you're a member of OHVTA, I can certainly help you with that. But you need to have that presence. Go to their Facebook page today and send them a message. Not all of them will have an official Facebook page, but the majority of them these days do. Send them a message. And again, be polite. Ask them to remove Tobacco 21 and the expanded definition of a tobacco product out of the budget bill.
And that's one of the biggest things, and I apologize because I'm reading down through some of the chat to make sure that I'm catching some of the questions, is that we need to make sure why we're calling. Keep it short, keep it simple. Mm-hmm. I've heard, I had a guest on once before that said chain letters like CASA, when his state gets them, typically may not have the impact as a handcrafted email. Do you find that to be a relatively true statement for Ohio, or do they actually look at all the things, as in if 100 people went through CASA and signed that up, would it work out okay? Would they count that as 100 people got in touch?
Right. I would say, yes, they would definitely count each one of those. CASA's system is set up that it's only going to generate an email to your actual state legislator. Like, we've had some people from out of state try to do it. They're not allowed to generate an email in this system. I will also say, during one of our tax fights in previous years, I had a legislator come up to me and said, Charlotte, please make the email stop. I'm getting so many emails. We're taking the tax out of the budget. Please make the email stop. We're not getting that this year. No. We're not getting, oh my God, I'm hearing from so many people in my district about Tobacco 21. We're not. People are not engaged this cycle and not engaged on this issue, and we don't know why.
Again, and I have heard it from shop owners, people that walk in the store, consumers, people that get letters that they are looking at the national T21 is going to take effect. So they are looking, unfortunately, when they're looking at their email, T21, and their brain stops at T21. Right. And that's the whole reason.
Right. And I'll say this about the national T21. One, the language that Ohio is looking to enact in this bill is not the same as the national language. The bill that's going to pass here is going to have effects in Ohio regardless if the national legislation passes. We think the national bill is going to go. It's certainly sponsored by the leader of the Senate, so that's a great indication. But that language is different than what's in this bill in Ohio. In terms of definitions of what a vapor product is, they're awful in Ohio. These definitions that have been written in this bill are awful. They're obviously written by someone who does not know the industry and does not know how the vapor product works. We have multiple definitions for the same thing. It's confusing. No one quite understands what they're trying to get at. But just because this is going to pass on the national level does not mean we should not be concerned with what's happening here in Ohio.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I wanted to bring all of us together today, is to, for lack of better words, educate people about what is truly happening right now. T21, as you just mentioned, is vastly different in Ohio than it may be in any other state. But more importantly, they've got to look at both pieces of that, the T21 and the tobacco labeling, because if that labeling goes, we have a whole new set of problems. And all of this, and please, anybody correct me if I'm incorrect, all of this can be stopped if we have people calling their representatives.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, I'll say this, and James and I and the board of OHVTA can only do so much as 2 or 3 or 4 people walking the halls of the State House. We were really successful in the tax issue, but we also had a very large coalition of people that we were working with, including the tobacco companies, including the retail merchants, including the convenience stores and all the gas stations. We don't have that this time around. That group is so divided on Tobacco 21 because you have some people who support it, some people who don't want to be involved in it, some people who are against it like us. We do not have that large coalition of people this year. And so it is James and I out there talking to these legislators. And if they're not hearing from anybody else, certainly if they're not hearing from their constituents, they're not going to do this. They need to have a reason to take this language out of the bill. And that reason should be their constituents are calling for them to do so. And I guarantee you, because I've seen it, that the Heart Association and the Cancer Society also have a network, just like we do, who are sending letters asking the legislature to pass Tobacco 21. And so if their constituency and their advocacy network are sending those letters and those emails and nothing's coming from the vapor industry, who are they going to listen to?
You just brought something to my attention that I wasn't even thinking of. And I'm sure that if people were listening, it hit them the same way. Oh, shit.
Right. So the lobbyist for the Heart Association is a friend of mine. We've worked together on issues in the past before he was at Heart Association. And I can see on his Facebook every day, he is posting the Heart Association's call to action on Tobacco 21 to encourage your state senator to pass it. And so if people aren't filling out CASA's call to action, but people are filling out Heart Association's call to action, what do we think is going to happen?
I know what's going to happen. I'm sitting here trying not to swear.
I mean, this has long-lasting implications. Let's say next year we want to introduce a bill that will protect the industry from future issues. Do you think they're even going to give it 2 seconds of their time?
No.
If we can't even get 1,500 to 2,000 people to send an email asking their senator and chairman of the finance committee to please pull this language, do you think they're even going to give us any kind of consideration? I don't care what kind of education that Charlotte and myself and the rest of the board has done with these senators one-on-one. It's not going to matter if we don't make our voices heard somehow. And we're giving it to you to where all you have to do is put your address in and hit send.
Mike, we couldn't even get more than 6 people to attend the hearing last week. And at the end of that hearing, because we were the last to go, which happens to us every time we testify, it's just how it is, we were the only ones still sitting in that room. It would have made a huge statement if there had been 20, 30, 40 people sitting in that room waiting for James and our 2 other store owners to testify. But there weren't. There were 6 people. And James was one of them who had to be there.
That's part of what floored me. I did not even look to see how many shops are around in a 50 to 100 mile radius.
I can tell you, around Columbus, there's over 100.
And I understand that you have a business to run and you need to make your money for that day. But at the same point in time, if this definition of tobacco product goes, you may not have a business in 3 or 4 years.
And people need to hear that. I hope people are listening. This is not stuff to fearmonger about, people.
And I'm going to interrupt.
Go ahead.
From what both James and Charlotte said, when I was at the meeting a couple weeks ago at the Ohio Vapor Association meeting, it was very clear to me, Senator Eklund,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to mess his name up.
Yep.
When he said when it was asked if you should call or write or knock on a door, he literally said it doesn't matter. And this is the part for consumers, which kind of shocked me personally. He said sometimes we don't know when we're voting on something what anyone thinks because no one has emailed, has called, or has come by to say what they feel about the issue. I don't care what issue it is. This happens to be vapor, but any issue, and they don't understand the way they should vote except on their own thoughts because no one has emailed or called. That's crazy. And you're right, Charlotte. When you guys think as businesses, I'm not. When you're a business and you've got 30 people and you're a heart association, the lung association, tobacco free kids, whoever it is, they have thousands and thousands of people on thousands of email lists, and they're all intertwined, and they're going to get what they want.
Right.
And as a consumer, I get really frustrated when I hear what you guys are going through and how hard you guys work. You guys, Florida, Tennessee, there's a few others as well I don't want to omit, but it's crazy how Florida has done so well. Ohio, in my opinion, you guys have rocked completely. And it drives me nuts when the consumers are just thumbing butts and walking around like nothing's ever going to happen.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the things that, James especially has heard from people is, oh, well, I'm over 21, so this doesn't affect me, and so I don't need to participate. Well, one, what if you have a child or teenager or someone who this would affect in the future? Yeah. Two, what if they had tried to do that when you were 18, 19, 20 and wanting to buy a vapor product? How would you feel then? And then three, we do still have this larger issue of the expanded definition of tobacco product that's in it. And maybe our messaging needs to change. Maybe we need to stop talking about tobacco 21 and talk about tobacco product. If that's what's going to get people to send an email, then tell us that and tell us that we need to change our messaging. Right. I've been doing this for a long time, but at the same point in time, I'm not part of your industry. I've certainly learned a lot about it in the last 5 years, and I certainly feel like I know the industry fairly well. But you guys got to tell James and I what you need to hear and what's going to make your customers, send that email.
Joining us on your screen right now, it's a 2-for-1 deal. I know on the one side is Mr. Jerry Reed. Tell me the other gentleman that's there.
Mathew Milby. This is Matt.
Hi, Matt. Thank you both for joining. These gentlemen are here, and I was talking with Jerry about this earlier, and especially last night, because he posted a comment from his aspect of Maryland. This is bad news if this goes through. He goes, I hope it doesn't go through. Jerry, Matt, how did it affect Maryland with being labeled tobacco?
Well, I mean, in the legislation, they absolutely reclassified us as tobacco, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to tax us next, and we're expecting that. But I mean, I don't know what you want, specifically that being labeled that does. I mean, it lumps us in the same category. There's no separation in the bill. Anything that was like an aerosol or smoking device, vaping. I mean, they anything that could be considered a vape at all is now tobacco. Is one and the same. I mean, even when we got up to testify, I was telling Jerry earlier, the chairman of the committee was the sponsor of the bill. And then he got up in front of everybody when he was testifying, told his story about how his grandfather died from smoking. And he goes, well, you'll hear testimony later on today that says that this vaping stuff is safer than smoking. And he just looks at everybody and then he shouts, he goes, it ain't. And I'm just like, I mean, they did not want to hear anything from us. They didn't care. It fell on deaf ears.
Did it make an impact? Did it influence other people when they turn around and labeled it? Did it sway a lot of any legislators' minds that, oh my God, this is tobacco. It is as bad as smoking?
Well, we're taking a lot of efforts this summer to meet with a lot of legislators because I think a lot of them are just uneducated and they think it's the same or just as bad, and we got to prove to them it's not, because me and Elmer Bailey, we were down there and he was quoting stuff from the American Cancer Society, and one of the senators, she's like, I'm a huge supporter of the American Cancer Society. There's no way that this is true. That's a lie. And we're like, no, they said that. And so we sent her stuff to her office, all these quotes, the American Cancer Society, which is right on their website. And so we need to do a better job of educating the legislators because they just don't know, or they're misinformed.
Jerry, have you seen an impact in your store since that point? Has it scared anybody away?
Well, because of the strict carding we do, I mean, we have a small portion of our customers, 21, but if we all have harm vape, not really against V20, it's the V20. Like
Jerry, if you can, you're going to have to speak up a little bit or move closer to the PC.
Hear me better now?
A little bit.
Here, let me move this here.
It just kept cutting out, Matt.
Well, I think, it's this whole defining us as tobacco was their goal. We didn't have any flavor bans introduced. No taxes. They were just single-minded P21, and classifying us as tobacco seemed to be their own goal.
From your estimation and standpoint, do you believe in your state that you are now open to further taxation, flavor bans, things that we were talking about?
I think next year this is exactly what they're doing. They just laid the groundwork. Our state isn't so desperate. Other states are trying to tax this year because they're in trouble. And you would ask that question first about the store, and I said that most of our customers are 21 and over, probably 5% of the customers. But as far as the impact of the store, we've educated them, told them what happened, fought against it. That Juul was a very strong lobbying force in our state for quite.
So, yeah, and your audio was still cutting out just a little bit, but this is part of the reason that I asked Jerry, and I'm glad that Matt is there. I'm glad that you joined, Jerry, because people need to know. And he said it. What they're trying to do in Ohio right now is lay the groundwork for more taxation, more action against vapor, because they don't want vapor products around.
No, they don't.
Yep.
The OHVTA is come out, and you know it's going to be coming around, that IQOS is going to be hitting the market fairly soon. They got their FDA approval. They're not going to wait. They're going to go like gangbusters as quick as they can. And IQOS' biggest competitor is vapor product. What we know as vapor product. Things like this. They bought their share into Juul. And Juul, if you have read anything, is thinking about opening their own little stores, like IQOS stores, to avoid being in gas stations and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So we're at a point where this whole thing can blow up horribly if we don't do something about it. James, I'm going to ask for your thoughts on that.
Sorry, Charlotte just texted me, said she had a power outage, and I was trying to deal with that. So I missed part of your question, Mike.
That's okay.
What was it? So what was the question?
IQOS, we know, is going to be coming around. Okay. And they're going to be building their own stores. Juul is talking about building their own stores, which means the tobacco companies do not want flavored vapor products on the market like we know vapor products to be.
Right. I mean, it's going to end up being a Juul / IQOS store. It's the only way they're going to be able to do it. and be profitable. We all know that their margin is going to be a lot better than it would be for any other store to carry their products because they're the manufacturer. But if they become the one-stop shop, so to speak, they can use the vapor product to transition people over into IQOS or vice versa. They're going to have a captive audience because they're going to be, like I said, that one-stop shop. And they will include flavors, just the flavors that they want, not necessarily the flavors that we want. They won't push for a cotton candy, but they may push for a strawberry or a blueberry or a grape. Does that make sense? And I think you'll see them continue after they try a couple of test market stores in some of the larger areas, get their store down to a science to where it's footprintable or a store in a box, and you're going to start seeing them popping up everywhere.
Yep.
And they'll start pushing out stores like mine and like Matt's and companies like yours because they don't carry your product, and they're going to be so easy for a new user to come into because sometimes people are a little bit intimidated by walking into a vape shop. But they would not be intimidated to walking into, let's say, a store like theirs that has something they're familiar with, like tobacco, in the IQOS, or something that's not as difficult to operate, like a Juul.
Yep.
They won't be as intimidated to walk into that store, whereas they would be to a store like ours because we have some of these devices that look like you're landing an airplane to operate them, or putting out vape. It looks like a locomotive. I mean, it's the truth. As much as we hate to admit it, we've done a lot of our own damage to our own public persona, and people are just afraid to walk in. So I think that's going to be their benefit.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you a hardcore question.
Okay.
And for the people that are watching or listening, it took me, I'm going to say 3 or 4 months of talking with Kevin before I truly understood what he does, why he does what he does. He's not just a vaping advocate. He is a tobacco harm reduction advocate, which means here's a guy that believes in vapor products, that believes in Juul, that believes in IQOS, anything that would move people away from smoking. That's his job. That's what he blogs about. That's what he does. And for the first little time that I met him in Columbus, I could not wrap my mind around that. Thankfully, he was kind enough to help educate me on what he does and why. From your standpoint,
why not?
Huh?
I said, or why not?
Yeah. From your standpoint, looking at what they're trying to do, labeling us as tobacco, seeing IQOS getting ready to come out, hearing that Juul might come out with stores, how is that sitting with you, for lack of better words?
It's not sitting well. I don't like some of the devices / ways to reduce harm, if you will. I told you the other day, as a consumer, and if you guys want to use it in the same vein, as a consumer or a business, if one threat comes, it's a snowball downhill. This is completely a snowball. I believe IQOS will help some of the people, like James said, is more familiar. When you've got grandma coming in and you've got 17 different devices, you've got 300 ways to stick a coil in, and you're going to confuse somebody. Think of who you were when you started. If you had a Sigil, like I still got Sigil, I don't use them, I still have them. This is quick, simple, and easy for the consumer. This is what they're looking for. When I started, I had a Sigil-like. It was amazing because I didn't understand why it was working, and it worked. I didn't expect it to work. So when you go to something like, I didn't have one of these. A friend of mine gave me this, and I was like, I don't need that freaking thing. It's too big. I don't need the hassle. I'm using an old top on it. I've got other tops, but with Juul, when you're looking at your direct competition, if you're in business, you should know exactly what your there you go. I've still got one of those. I gave the other away. When your competition's coming in and they already have friends in high places, and now they've got more friends in high places with OHVTA, smoking will never go away, guys. That's a given. It's going to slowly diminish, but it won't go away. So as a consumer, I've got to look at my grandmother, it's always who I go to, or my father-in-law, or my dad. They want a cigarette. That's what they wanted. That's what we wanted when we smoked. If you accidentally or purposely changed from smoking to vaping, and you walk around blind like I did for a little more than a year, or you now realize that it's the pressure that the industry's under. There's Figueroni. Is so detrimental to you guys, Matt and Jerry. I'm stunned. I saw Pennsylvania. I remember that with Chris Hughes. It makes me want to cry how badly you guys are going to suffer, and then how badly somebody walking into your shops, 18, 19, and 20, who's been smoking since they were 13, and guys, the tobacco. Tobacco-free kids knows they started at 11, 12, and 13, just like I did at 9, and just like Jerry probably did at 12, and James did at 15, and Mike, I remember you saying you were 19. When's a smoker a smoker? You know?
There she is. She made it back. Joining us also, Charlotte has made it back. We've got Matt and Jerry out on the East Coast, and coming live from the West Coast with a guy that has a green screen that looks like it's going to go, It's Mr. Fig Ramsey. Matt, when you look at the possibilities, does it incite fear for what's going to happen come next year because you've been labeled as tobacco?
Oh, it absolutely does. Just the simple way that they railroaded this legislation through, and how they disregarded everything we had to say. Absolutely, I'm fearful of what they're going to pull or do or say next session. Thankfully, our session only lasts for 90 days, but you can get a lot done in 90 days, legislation. I also wanted to talk about what James was saying with Juul. We went to the VTA convention down in Texas, and we had dinner with Juul. And they were pretty arrogant, and they to the flavors. They basically told us, straight to my face, there is no adult that needs to vape cotton candy. Arrogant level as we have a set of flavors that we think are appropriate, and we're pushing for those flavors only. What's going to benefit us? Because we're in charge. That's the intent I got from them.
And then we have the PMTA. Stop.
Fig, I'm going to ask you a question. In your estimation, because you have been around, pardon me, like everywhere, in other states that you have seen this happen, how did it impact their states over time? And thank you for coming in.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, James, Charlotte, Mr. Kevin Crowley. I love you.
Sir, I love you
I love
too,
all
buddy.
you guys. Matt, Jerry, you're looking damn sexy in that T-shirt. This is why we do it, right? Lungs fucking matter. Here's the thing: it's absolutely disastrous, and anybody that is within earshot, guess what? If you think that T21 is a foregone conclusion, probably is, but that doesn't mean you stop fucking fighting. If you think that being lumped into tobacco is a foregone conclusion, look to Florida. Florida proved it. It's not a foregone conclusion. What you got to do is you got to stand up and fight, because it is absolutely disastrous. Look at California. We got hit with a 65% vape tax. First things first, then, when they got us put into the tobacco category, Charlotte and James said it, you automatically get thrown into OTP. And whether there's language or not, guess what? If there's not language for OTP that has vapor, it will be coming very soon. What happened